Imagine that. You are spending time on the south coast and you're spending time on the west coast. The idea of furnished or semi-furnished. What does that mean? Semi-furnished. So you want to come to Barbados to spend 3 months of the year, each year in Barbados. Yes. If that's your dream, if that's something that you want to turn into reality, keep watching. Finally, you have decided that you are going to come to Barbados on your first scouting trip. You could stay at a hotel, you could stay with your family and friends, or you could rent an apartment, rent a villa, or even rent a room in someone's house. So if you think these things could be of interest to you in your journey to Barbados, make sure you keep watching. My name is Jay. I am the creator of Expat Barbados. I help you make the move to Barbados in a way that suits you, your needs, and your interests. In today's video, I am going to be sharing with you 5 things you need to consider before you start your rental journey in Barbados. The first thing that you really have to consider is your budget, because if you are going to be away in Barbados for 2, 3, however many months, you need to be clear that you are going to have enough money. And I would say that your biggest outgoing is going to be your accommodation. So you need to think very carefully how much you are willing to spend or can spend on your accommodation. One of the important things to remember is that when you are in Barbados, the cost of hotels, the cost of villas is actually in US dollars or Bayesian dollars. So you need to really have an understanding of the exchange rate and the fact that the exchange rates do fluctuate. We all know that Barbados is expensive. We do know that. So how can we save our money to ensure our money can go as far as possible? So to help you decide what your budget is, I am going to be sharing with you some of the prices that I have seen on AirBnB, because I think that is a site that most of you will be very familiar with, and I think it's helpful for you to have a look there, at least initially, to give you an idea of the prices of rental apartments and rooms and so on. The price you see is based on a 30-day stay in the month of September. So you can actually have 3 people in this. It's 3 guests. You have 1 bedroom and there's 1 bed, and there's probably another pull down bed somewhere, and 1 bathroom. So it's great for remote work, and they actually go into the details and the fact that this person has amenities for everyday living, and this place has been equipped specifically for people who want to stay for long stay. So these are the things that you need to keep an eye on. The kitchen, there's free parking, and there's AC included. I'd be asking the question, well, you know, where is the AC? And you can cancel, free cancellation before the 2nd of August. Now this particular apartment is in Oysters. It is a 1 bedroom, 1 bed, 1 bathroom, and can take up to 3 guests. So I suspect that means there is a sofa bed. The price for the month of September is a reduced price, which is why I was saying it's so important to look for low season. Normally 1,121, and in now going for 728. My tip here when considering the budget is look for off season, and for me, in my mind, off season is from May through to October. So if you were going to come for a couple of months, then I would suggest the September, October, maybe through to November, because that gives you the transition from the quieter months to the months, which is generally December, when the high season starts to build and you'll see more tourists come to the island. So that way you get an idea of what it's like to be on the island when it's quieter with less tourists, and when the tourist season starts and it gets busier. So I would suggest September, October and November as those three. Let me know in the chat how many months you would consider coming to Barbados as part of your first seasonal trip. Would it be 1 month? Would it be 2 months? Would it be 3 months? Would it be more? The second thing that you really need to consider after your budget is, where do you want to actually stay? Now you might say to me, Jay, actually it's where I can afford to stay, and I could really definitely understand that. Yes, but you also need to consider that it has to be, particularly for your first few times coming to Barbados, I would certainly recommend that you choose somewhere that is either on the south coast or on the west coast, and definitely near public transport, so that you are not completely reliant on having to hire a car. And that is feasible. There are many people who come to Barbados and they do not hire a car, because getting around on public transport is actually very feasible and also very affordable in Barbados. I would be less inclined to encourage you to get taxis, because taxis are expensive. If you were up for hiring a car, then you can actually get some very reasonable deals to hire cars. So that might be an option. If you're coming for a couple of months, you might say, you know what, for a month or for 2 weeks or for 3 weeks, I'm going to hire a car, because I'm going to use that opportunity to do certain things, get around the island, explore the island, or whatever, maybe even go to look and view properties and so on. So the first thing I think you need to do is familiarise yourself with Barbados. You need to start to learn about the different parishes. You need to consider the areas that are more touristy and the areas that are less touristy. Now, I would say that if it's your first time in Barbados, it would probably be a good idea to go to the areas which are more touristy, so that you can get a feel for that. And that would be the south coast, which is where the airport is. It's also where you probably hear people who talk about Oistins, they talk about St. Lawrence Gap. So the south coast has some beautiful beaches, has some more affordable places where you can actually stay, and it's very, very accessible, easy to get around, and a really good transportation, and access to Bridgetown, which is of course the capital. So there's lots of positive and lots of reasons why I would definitely recommend the southern part of the island if it's your first time here. Now, the west coast is also a very beautiful place, and somewhere that I would recommend. Generally, the west coast is more expensive, and it tends to be quieter and less tourists, but it is actually becoming more and more popular. It has a very laid back feel to it, but it can be expensive in some aspects, unless of course, as I've always said to you, you learn how to shop wisely and shop smartly and shop local. Some of my favourite places in the West Coast, as you know, is Speightstown, but also Whole Town, which is actually really, really popular. That is another little town in St. James, the parish of St. James. Again, I would thoroughly recommend along that coast as well. Yes, it may be more expensive, but it's certainly worth looking. But I have to say, one of my favourite areas is St. Lucie, and that is in the northern part of the island. So it all depends on the lifestyle that you want to lead. I'm recommending the south coast and the west coast as an initial place to come if you've never been to Barbados, but I wouldn't rule out the north coast and the east coast if you are already familiar with Barbados and those are the areas that you know that you would like to live in because you've got family there, or because you just enjoy the natural beauty of those places and you are familiar with them. The great thing about Barbados is every part of the island has its beauty and has its own uniqueness. So it really just depends on you. The most important thing is that you get the opportunity when you are in Barbados to get around the island so that you can see for yourself and make a decision which areas are the best for you. If you think what I am sharing with you has been really helpful, please take the time to consider subscribing to my channel. Subscribing and liking the videos that I actually produce does help me enormously to grow the channel and helps the YouTube algorithm to know that people are finding this interesting, and so therefore send it out to other people who may find it interesting too. Just push that button and subscribe, press the notification bell so you know when I next upload my video. You do not want to miss out. I would recommend AirBnB most certainly as a starting point. You may move on to agents, you may move on to talking to other people through Facebook and so on, but I think AirBnB is a great way to start. There are many advantages to using AirBnB. First one is obviously it's online, it's very accessible, and the great thing is that you can put in your budget and you will find a selection of accommodation to suit you. And that is the great thing. When you're searching on Airbnb, you can specify your budget, you can specify the areas. What I like about Airbnb is the fact that it is very simple. You can contact the owners and you generally get a very quick response. You can ask the questions you want to ask. You can book something, and if you decide the week later or 2 weeks later you want to cancel, you can cancel it. As long as you are cancelling it within the cancellation period, you will get all your money back. You can check out the reviews, you can see what people are saying about it. You have more control. You're not waiting for estate agents to get back to you. You're not waiting for estate agents to send you a selection of properties. You can very quickly get onto Airbnb and you can see for yourself. Now, if Airbnb does not offer you what you want, then I would look at the estate agents, the Realtors. But you must remember that Airbnb does have additional costs for cleaning, and there is also Airbnb's service additional costs. So that's important to remember that as well. So don't just go by what you immediately see when you're searching. Click into that and look further and you will find the full cost. There are some things that I would say that you have to be careful of with Airbnb, and that is that photos, I've experienced this myself, that sometimes those photos are very old photos. So I would advise you to make sure that when you're communicating with the host that you ask them, even if they will send you some photographs, or ask those questions. Is this place how I am seeing it now on this site? How old is this advert? How long has this advert or these photographs been on this site? Have they been updated? Because it really is important that if you are going to use Airbnb to actually book a property and you're not able to go and see it, you need to be able to trust that what you're seeing is what you're going to get. and in some cases it isn't. So it is quite important that you do your due diligence when it comes to this. A good tip here is if you have family or friends who are living on the island, you could actually ask them to go and just check out that particular place, obviously by contacting the host, and just say, look, my friend's going to come over, or my family member's going to come over. I'm sure they won't mind that, as long as there's nobody staying there at that particular point. Another advantage to using Airbnb is that they also give you discounts, particularly if you are going to stay there for 2 to 3 months. So it's worth asking that question as well. You know, if you book for a month, maybe if you book for another month, would they consider a discount? Now, another tip is to make sure you book early. I can't stress how important it is really to book ahead, because Barbados now is becoming very popular and more people are moving away from the hotels because they want to stay there on a longer term basis. So let me know in the comments whether you are considering the South Coast, the West Coast, the East Coast, or even the North Coast as your location for your seasonal retirement. Now, the fourth thing that you need to consider is, if Airbnb does not suit you or doesn't work for you, then yes, I would recommend you look at agents, the realtors out there on the island, people who could perhaps do some of that work for you. Now, it probably will mean that you will wait a little bit longer. The process might take a bit more time, but that's something that you may think, I don't mind waiting, I don't mind taking that time, because you are preparing well ahead of the time that you are going to be on the island. Now, the great thing about using agents is that they do not charge. So that's something to bear in mind, and that's one less thing to worry about. It is important that you are clear with what it is that you want. What are your requirements? What are you looking for? What is your budget? In terms of looking for properties, there are some differences in the way that things are done in Barbados in terms of how it might be done in your home country, and even the language that we are using. So it really is important to clarify everything. So when they say it's furnished, you need to say, could you be more specific? What do you mean by furnished? You probably want to know, is there AC? And that is important because, again, often the advert will say they have AC, but actually AC could just be in the bedrooms and maybe not in the lounge areas. Is it inclusive of bills? Does it include the electricity, the water? Is there Wi-Fi or broadband, TV? These are the things that you need to be asking if you want to be comfortable when you get to the place that you have booked for your seasonal stay in Barbados. Here's a tip. This is something that I have seen people doing, where they're coming to the island and they are coming for 2 or 3 months. But what they do is they might book 1 month on the south of the island and maybe another month on the west side of the island. Now, I think that's a really good thing to consider doing, because it gives you the chance to get an idea of what it's like living for a longer period on 2 sides of the island. I think it's definitely worth considering. Now, my 5th consideration is, why not come with a friend or a family member? This way you can split the cost of everything, which will make your stay in Barbados much more accessible.